I was staring at my phone screen when the voicemail notification appeared. The number was blocked, but I knew that voice the moment it started playing. Eleanor, my mother. Her words were shaky, broken. Nothing like the icy certainty I remembered. Maya, Mishinloy, I'm sorry. After 15 years of silence, after everything she put me through, those were the words she chose. My finger hovered over the delete button as my other hand unconsciously touched the scar on my forehead, the one that never quite faded. The scar from the day she taught me that some people don't deserve a second chance. Before we go any further, if you're enjoying this story and want to hear more real-life journeys about overcoming toxic relationships and finding your own strength, please hit that like button and subscribe. Your support means everything, and I read every single comment you leave. Now let me take you back to where it all began, because understanding how I got here requires knowing where I came from. I grew up in a house that looked perfect from the outside. The kind of house you'd see in a magazine spread about successful American families. White columns framing the entrance, perfectly manicured lawn that Richard paid a landscaping crew to maintain, weekly seasonal wreaths that Eleanor changed religiously to match whatever holiday was approaching. From the street, we were the epitome of the American dream. My father, Richard, was a successful corporate lawyer at one of the city's most prestigious firms. He wore $1,000 suits and had his name on the letterhead. My mother, Eleanor, didn't work. Not in the traditional sense, but she was always busy. She ran charity galas, sat on the boards of 3 different nonprofits, and smiled for the cameras at fundraising events. She had a photographer's smile, the kind that looked genuine in pictures, but never quite reached her eyes in person. And then there was my older sister, Chloe. God, where do I even start with Chloe? She was everything they ever wanted wrapped up in one perfect package. Beautiful with Eleanor's high cheekbones and thick blonde hair that always looked like she'd just left a salon. Confident in the way that only people who've never been told no can be. Charming, effortlessly popular, the kind of girl who could walk into a room and immediately become its center. Then there was me, Maya, the shadow they never asked for. The accident that happened when Eleanor was 42 and thought she was done with children. I heard her tell that story at a dinner party once, laughing about how surprised she'd been, how she'd thought she was going through early menopause. And then surprise another baby at my age. The guests had laughed. I was 12, serving appetizers like always, and I'd felt something crack inside my chest. From as early as I can remember, I knew I was different in their eyes. I have this memory from when I was maybe 6 or 7. Chloe had brought home a report card with straight A's, and Eleanor had thrown an actual party. I'm not exaggerating. She invited Chloe's friends over, ordered a cake from the expensive bakery downtown, the one with the French name I couldn't pronounce. The cake had, "Congratulations, Chloe," written in perfect cursive frosting. 2 months later, I brought home my first report card. Also straight A's. I remember being so excited, practically vibrating with anticipation as I handed it to Eleanor. She'd been in the kitchen preparing dinner, and she'd glanced at it while stirring something on the stove. "Very good, Maya," she'd said, her tone flat and distracted. "Put it on the refrigerator." That was it. No cake, no party, no celebration of any kind. When I'd asked, voice small, and already knowing the answer, if we could maybe go out for ice cream to celebrate, Eleanor had sighed, like I'd asked her to fly me to the moon. "Maya, you're supposed to get good grades. That's the expectation. We don't celebrate people for doing what they're supposed to do." She'd turned back to the stove, dismissing me. "Now set the table, please. Your father will be home soon." I'd stood there for a moment, holding my report card, trying to understand why Chloe's A's warranted a party, but mine warranted a chore reminder. I was 6. I didn't have the language yet to understand what was happening, but I felt it deep in my bones. The difference, the inequality, the fundamental unfairness of it all. The pattern played out in every aspect of our lives. When Chloe wanted a new dress, it was an event. Eleanor would announce they were going shopping, and they'd disappear for entire Saturdays. They'd come home with bags and bags from Nordstrom and Bloomingdale's, laughing about something a saleswoman had said, sharing inside jokes I wasn't part of. Chloe would model her new clothes, and Eleanor would clap and take pictures, gushing about how beautiful her daughter was. When I needed school supplies or new shoes because I'd outgrown my old ones, Eleanor would leave cash on the kitchen counter with a post-it note. "For school things, keep the receipt." The bills always felt cold in my hands, impersonal and transactional. Sometimes there wasn't even a note, just money left out like payment for services rendered. Once I'd made the mistake of asking if I could come along on one of their shopping trips. I was maybe 10 years old. Eleanor and Chloe were getting ready to leave, and I'd appeared in the doorway of the foyer, hopeful. "Can I come too?" I'd asked. "I need new jeans. These ones are getting too short." Eleanor had looked at me like I'd suggested something completely absurd. "Maya, this is mother-daughter time for me and Chloe. Besides, you'd just be bored. We're shopping for her school dance dress." I wouldn't be bored. I'd insisted that pathological hope, already taking root even then. I could help pick out dresses, and maybe we could look at jeans while we're there. Chloe had laughed, not even trying to hide her disdain. "Why would we want you there? You'd just ruin everything. You always do." "Chloe's right," Eleanor had said, adjusting her purse on her shoulder. "We'll be more efficient without distractions. There's money on the counter. Take the bus to Target and get yourself some jeans if you need them so badly." They'd left, and I'd stood there in that big empty house, listening to Eleanor's car pull out of the driveway. I was 10 years old, and I was being told to take public transportation by myself to Target, while my mother took my sister to high-end department stores. The message was clear: Chloe deserved boutique attention, and I deserved discount bins. But I told myself it was normal. I had to. What else was I supposed to do? I convinced myself that this was just how families worked. Families have favorites, right? Maybe it was a birth order thing. Maybe Eleanor just connected better with Chloe because they'd had more time together before I came along and complicated things. Maybe. I became an expert at making excuses for them. If I just tried harder, worked harder, stayed quieter, caused fewer problems, maybe they'd see me too. Maybe one day I'd wake up and matter to them the way Chloe did. It was the hope that killed you, really. The constant, exhausting hope that things would change if I could just figure out the right formula, the right way to be. The pattern was set early, and it was ironclad. Chloe would break something: a vase, a picture frame, one memorable time. The screen door when she'd slammed it too hard, and somehow it would become my fault. She had this talent for crying on command, for making herself the victim of any situation. I remember when I was 12 and she was 16. She'd borrowed my bike without asking and crashed it, bending the front wheel completely out of shape. When I'd found it in the garage, I'd been devastated. That bike was the only thing that was truly mine, that I'd saved up my birthday money for over 2 years to buy. I'd confronted her, tears already streaming down my face. "Chloe, my bike, what did you do?" She'd barely looked up from her phone. "Oh, that? Yeah, I borrowed it, hit a curb. You really should keep your stuff in better condition, Maya. It's dangerous to ride something that unstable." "It wasn't unstable until you crashed it." I'd been so angry, angrier than I usually allowed myself to be. "You didn't even ask, and now it's ruined." "Wow, okay, sorry for using your stupid bike," she'd sneered. "God, you're so dramatic. It's just a bike. Mom can buy you a new one." But when I'd gone to Eleanor hoping for some kind of justice, some acknowledgement that Chloe had done something wrong, it had backfired spectacularly. Chloe had gotten there first, had spun some story about how she'd borrowed the bike to run an errand for Eleanor, how the bike had been in poor condition and that's why she crashed, how I was being selfish and materialistic for caring more about a bike than the fact that she could have been seriously hurt. "Maya, your sister could have been injured," Eleanor had said, her voice sharp with disapproval. "And you're worried about a bike? Do you have any idea how self-centered that sounds? You should be grateful she's okay." "But she broke my bike," I'd protested, my voice rising. "The bike I saved for 2 years to buy, it was mine and she didn't ask, and now it's broken." "You're grounded," Eleanor had said flatly. 2 weeks, no TV, no computer, no going out with friends. Maybe that will teach you to think about someone other than yourself for once. I'd been grounded for being upset that my sister destroyed my property. That was the moment I started to understand that there were no rules in that house, no justice, no fairness. There was only what Eleanor decided, and Eleanor always decided in Chloe's favor. It happened over and over again. Chloe would take my clothes without asking, would stretch out my sweaters, or stain my shirts, or lose my shoes at some party. When I'd complain, when I'd dare to suggest that maybe she should ask before taking my things, or replace what she'd ruined, Eleanor would look at me with that particular expression of disappointment she'd perfected. "Maya, your sister needs these things more than you do. She has a social life. She has friends who actually want to be around her. She needs to look her best. Surely you can understand that and be generous enough to share." The implication was always there, hanging in the air between us like smog. Chloe deserved nice things because she was social, popular, pretty. I didn't deserve them because I was none of those things. And I should be grateful to even have a sister like Chloe, should be happy to sacrifice my belongings for her benefit. The words stung every single time, but I learned to swallow the pain. I learned to smile and nod and say, "Of course, Mom, it's fine." It was never fine, but saying so only made things worse. By the time I was 15, I'd become an expert at being invisible. I kept my head down at school, ate lunch in the library, and came straight home to do chores that were somehow always my responsibility, despite Chloe being older. I cooked dinner most nights because Eleanor said she was too tired from her volunteer work. I cleaned the bathrooms, did the laundry, and somehow still managed to maintain a 4.0 GPA. None of it was ever acknowledged. It was just what I was supposed to do, the price of having a roof over my head. The financial aspect was particularly cruel. My parents were wealthy by any standard. Our house in the suburbs was massive with a pool and a 3-car garage. But while Chloe got a new car for her 16th birthday, a sleek white BMW that she promptly crashed within 3 months, I was told that I'd need to save up for my own transportation. When Chloe wanted to go on a spring break trip with her friends, Eleanor didn't blink before handing over her credit card. When I asked if I could join the debate team, which required a $50 fee, I was told that money didn't grow on trees and I needed to learn the value of hard work. So I got a job. At 15, I started working weekends at a small cafe downtown, lying about my age because I was desperate. Every dollar I earned I hid in an old jewelry box under my bed, dreaming of the day I'd have enough to escape. But even that small act of independence seemed to irritate Eleanor. She'd make comments about how I was playing adult or how I was abandoning my family responsibilities by working. The irony was lost on her entirely. The emotional manipulation was constant and subtle. Eleanor had a way of making everything my fault. If she was in a bad mood, it was because I'd left a glass in the sink. If Richard was stressed about work, it was because I'd made too much noise the night before. If Chloe was upset about something, somehow, I was always the convenient target. And my father, Richard, was perhaps the cruelest of all in his passivity. He never hit me, never yelled, never openly chose sides. He just looked away, every single time. I remember once when I was 13, I tried to talk to him about how Eleanor treated me. We were in his study, and I'd worked up the courage over days to finally say something. I told him that I felt like I didn't matter, that I felt like a burden. He'd looked up from his papers, adjusted his glasses, and said, "Maya, your mother is doing her best. Life isn't fair, and the sooner you learn that, the better off you'll be." Then he went back to his reading. That was it. That was the moment I learned that my pain was an inconvenience to him, not something worth addressing. But I kept trying. That was the thing about me back then. I was pathologically hopeful. I kept thinking that if I just loved them enough, worked hard enough, stayed quiet enough, things would change. When Eleanor's birthday came around, I'd save up my cafe wages to buy her expensive chocolates or a nice scarf. She'd open them with a thin smile and say, "How thoughtful," in a tone that made it clear it wasn't thoughtful at all. Chloe would laugh and show off the designer purse she'd gotten Mom, and the comparison would hang in the air like smoke. High school was its own special hell. Chloe was a senior when I was a sophomore, which meant I lived in her shadow even at school. Her friends would see me in the hallways and make comments just loud enough for me to hear. "That's Chloe's weird sister. How are they even related? I heard she's basically the family servant." I'd pretend not to hear, but each word carved a little deeper into whatever self-esteem I had left. The worst part was that I started to believe them. I started to believe I was worthless, that I was the problem, that maybe I really didn't deserve better. When you're told something often enough, especially by the people who are supposed to love you unconditionally, it becomes your truth. I'd look in the mirror and see everything they saw, nothing but flaws and inadequacy. Then came the spring of my junior year. Prom was approaching, and while I'd never expected to go, never thought anyone would ask me, a small stupid part of me still wanted to experience it. I wanted one night to feel normal, to feel like I belonged somewhere. I didn't have the money for a dress, obviously. Eleanor had already dropped $3,000 on Chloe's custom gown, a stunning emerald creation that made my sister look like she'd stepped off a red carpet. But for me, there was nothing budgeted, nothing planned, nothing even considered. One afternoon when everyone was out, I found myself in Chloe's room. I know I shouldn't have been there, but I was drawn to it like a moth to flame. Her prom dress from the previous year was hanging in the closet, a beautiful deep blue that she'd worn exactly once. She'd complained about it after prom. Said the color washed her out, said she'd never wear it again. It was just hanging there, forgotten and unwanted. I couldn't help myself. I took it down and held it against my body in front of her full-length mirror. It was a little long on me since Chloe was taller, but it was beautiful. For just a moment, I let myself imagine what it would be like to wear it, to feel pretty, to not be invisible. I slipped it on over my clothes, careful not to damage it, and for the first time in my life, I saw something different in the mirror. Not Maya the burden, not Maya the shadow, just Maya. Then I saw Eleanor's lipstick on Chloe's vanity. That deep red shade, the one Eleanor always wore to important events. The one she'd once told Chloe was only for women who are confident and worthy enough to wear it. I picked it up, my hand shaking, and carefully applied it to my lips. The woman in the mirror looked older, stronger, almost like someone who mattered. I was so lost in that moment, in that brief fantasy of being enough, that I didn't hear Chloe come home early. I didn't hear her footsteps on the stairs. The first thing I knew was her shriek, piercing and theatrical, designed to bring the whole house running. "What the hell are you doing?" she screamed, her face contorted with rage that seemed excessive even for catching me in her room. Mom, get up here right now." I started to take the dress off, stammering apologies, but it was too late. Eleanor's footsteps were already thundering up the stairs, and when she appeared in the doorway, the look on her face made my blood run cold. It wasn't the hot anger of a normal parent catching their kid doing something wrong. It was something colder, darker, more calculated. It was contempt so pure it was almost fascinating. "You," she said, her voice barely above a whisper, but somehow more terrifying than any scream. "What the hell do you think you're doing?" "I'm sorry, I just wanted to see," I started, but she cut me off. "Wanted to see what it's like to be your sister. You think putting on her dress and stealing my lipstick makes you anything but what you are." She took a step closer, and I instinctively backed up until I hit the wall. "You're a pathetic little shadow, Maya. You always have been. You could wear 1,000 dresses and paint your face 1,000 ways, and you'd still be nothing compared to her." Chloe was loving every second of it. She had her phone out now, recording, her eyes bright with malicious glee. "Mom, look, she got makeup on the collar. She's ruining my memory dress, the one from when Connor asked me to prom. She ruins everything." "Take it off," Eleanor commanded. "Now." I fumbled with the zipper, my hands shaking so badly I could barely grip it. Tears were already streaming down my face, smearing the red lipstick. I must have looked pathetic, and some part of me registered that this was exactly what they wanted. They wanted me broken and humiliated. But what happened next went beyond anything I could have imagined. As I was struggling out of the dress, Eleanor left the room. For a brief moment, I thought maybe that was it. Maybe I'd just get yelled at some more, and it would be over. But then she came back, and in her hands was one of Richard's golf clubs. A 7-iron, I think, though I wasn't exactly in the right mindset to identify it properly. "You need to learn your place," she said, her voice still terrifyingly calm. "You need to understand that there are consequences for reaching above your station." "Mom, please," I whispered, but she wasn't my mom in that moment. She was something else entirely. Something that had been hiding beneath the surface all along. "On your knees," she ordered. I didn't move fast enough, frozen in shock and disbelief. This couldn't be happening. Parents didn't do this, not in real life, not in suburban America, not in houses that looked like ours. I said, "On your knees." This time she did yell, and the sound broke through my paralysis. I dropped to the floor, and that's when the first blow came. She hit my shin, and the pain was immediate and all-consuming, white-hot, and shocking. I cried out, tried to curl away, but there was nowhere to go. The second blow came to my other leg, and I heard myself screaming, but it sounded far away, like it was coming from someone else. "This," Eleanor said, punctuating each word with another strike, "is what happens when you forget who you are. You are not Chloe. You will never be Chloe. You are the accident we got stuck with, and the sooner you accept that, the easier your life will be." I don't know how many times she hit me. 5, 6. Eventually, I tried to stand to get away, but my legs wouldn't hold me, and I fell forward, my head connecting with the sharp corner of Chloe's bedside table. The impact was sickening, and I felt something warm running down my forehead. Blood. The room started to spin. Through the haze of pain, I heard Chloe laughing, actually laughing, and taking pictures. She was documenting my humiliation, my pain, for what? To show her friends, to post online later. The cruelty was breathtaking. I don't remember exactly what happened next. I think I blacked out for a few seconds. When I came to, Eleanor was standing over me, the golf club still in her hand, breathing hard like she'd just finished a workout. "Clean yourself up," she said flatly, "and don't even think about going to that stupid dance tomorrow. You clearly can't be trusted." She left, taking the golf club with her. Chloe lingered for a moment longer, took one more photo of me lying there on the floor, blood mixing with tears and smeared lipstick, then followed her mother out. The door closed behind them, and I was alone. I don't know how long I lay there on Chloe's pink carpet, bleeding and broken. It could have been 5 minutes or 50. Time had lost all meaning. Eventually, I heard a car pull into the driveway. Richard was home. This was my chance. He'd see what they'd done. He'd have to do something. Fathers protected their daughters, right? That's what they did. Even fathers who looked away had limits, had lines that couldn't be crossed. I managed to crawl to the top of the stairs, leaving smears of blood on the cream-colored carpet. "Dad!" I called out, my voice weak and hoarse from crying. "Dad, please." He came into view at the bottom of the stairs, still in his suit briefcase in hand. His eyes traveled up from the blood on the carpet, to the blood on my face, to my red swollen legs visible beneath my shorts. For a moment, just a brief moment, I saw something flicker in his expression. Shock, concern. But then Eleanor appeared beside him, and whatever I'd seen vanished. "She had an accident," Eleanor said smoothly, as if we'd rehearsed this. "She was trying on Chloe's things without permission and fell. I've told her she needs to be more careful, but you know how clumsy she is." Richard looked at me. I looked back at him, pleading silently for him to see through the lie, to be my father for once in his life. Our eyes met, and I saw him make his choice. He looked away. "Don't upset your mother anymore," he said to me, his voice tired. "Clean up this mess and try to stay out of trouble for once." Then he walked away. He actually walked away. That was the moment I understood with perfect clarity that I was completely alone in that house. There was no one coming to save me. There was no adult who would choose my safety over their convenience. I had no one but myself. Somehow I made it back to my room. I locked the door. Something I rarely did because Eleanor hated locked doors, but I didn't care anymore. Let her break it down if she wanted. I couldn't take any more that night. I sat on my bed and examined the damage in the mirror on my closet door. The cut on my forehead was still bleeding, and I knew it would scar. My shins were already turning purple, huge, angry bruises that were swelling before my eyes. Every movement sent shooting pains through my legs. The worst part wasn't the physical pain. It was the realization that this was my life. This was what I'd been accepting, normalizing, explaining away for 17 years. My mother had beaten me with a golf club while my sister filmed it, and my father had seen the aftermath and chosen to do nothing. I'd been so focused on hoping things would get better, on trying to earn their love, that I'd never stopped to question whether people like this were capable of love at all. I pulled out my phone, the ancient hand-me-down that barely worked, and texted my friend Jenny. We were supposed to go to prom together as friends since neither of us had dates. I told her I'd fallen down the stairs and twisted my ankle badly, that I wouldn't be able to make it. She sent back sympathetic messages, offered to come over, but I made excuses. The lies felt like acid on my tongue, but I couldn't tell her the truth. I couldn't tell anyone the truth because some part of me was still worried they wouldn't believe me. Or worse, that they would believe me, and it would make everything real. That night, lying in my bed with ice packs on my legs and a bandage on my forehead, something fundamental shifted inside me. The hopeful, optimistic Maya, who thought love could fix anything, died on that floor. In her place was someone harder. Someone who understood that survival sometimes means letting go of the people who are supposed to love you. I started planning my escape that night. It wasn't some grand, detailed plan at first, just a simple driving need to get out. I couldn't do this for another year. I couldn't live in this house with these people pretending that any of this was normal or acceptable. I needed to leave, and I needed to do it in a way that they couldn't drag me back. The next morning, I could barely walk. The bruises had bloomed overnight into grotesque shades of purple and black, and the cut on my forehead was crusted with dried blood despite my best efforts to clean it. I wore jeans despite the spring heat, desperate to hide the evidence of what had happened. I pulled my hair forward to cover the bandage on my forehead. At breakfast, Chloe smirked at me over her orange juice but said nothing. Eleanor acted like nothing had happened, asked Richard about his schedule for the day, in that pleasant practice tone she used when she wanted to seem normal. Richard didn't look at me at all. I went to school because staying home felt more dangerous than leaving. I limped through the halls, ignoring the stares and whispered questions. In English class, my teacher, Ms. Albright, a young woman who'd always been kind to me, asked me to stay after class. My heart sank. I didn't want anyone asking questions I couldn't answer. "Maya," she said once the other students had filed out, her voice gentle but concerned, "I've noticed you seem to be in pain. And that bandage on your forehead. What happened?" "I fell," I said automatically, the lie coming easily now. "Down the stairs at home, clumsy." Ms. Albright studied me for a long moment. She was in her late 20s, idealistic and earnest in the way new teachers often are. Maya, I know we don't know each other very well, but I want you to know that my door is always open. If you ever need someone to talk to about anything, I'm here. No judgment, no requirements, just someone who will listen. Her words cracked something inside me. I felt tears threatening and blinked them back hard. Thank you, I managed my voice rough. I'll remember that. I meant it. As I limped out of her classroom, I realized she'd just thrown me a lifeline, even if she didn't fully understand the situation. Maybe there were good people in the world after all. Maybe I could find them if I just survived long enough. Over the next few weeks, I became strategic in a way I'd never been before. The physical wounds healed slowly. The cut on my forehead scabbed over and then left a thin, white scar that no amount of makeup could completely hide. The bruises on my legs faded from black to purple to green to yellow, finally disappearing completely, almost a month later. But something else had healed too, or maybe hardened is a better word. I stopped expecting anything from my family. I stopped trying to earn their approval or affection. I stopped caring what they thought of me at all. Instead, I focused on building my escape route. I started working extra shifts at the cafe, telling Eleanor I joined after-school clubs so she wouldn't know where I really was. I saved every penny, but this time, I didn't hide it at home. I opened a bank account using a fake ID I'd bought from a senior at school, lying about my age again. It was the first truly rebellious thing I'd ever done, and it felt powerful. Every deposit, even if it was just $20 or $30, felt like another brick in the wall between me and that house. I started documenting everything. I used my crappy phone to take pictures of any new bruises, any destruction of my belongings. Anything that might serve as evidence someday. I kept a journal hidden in my locker at school, detailing every cruel comment, every instance of neglect, every punishment that crossed the line. I recorded conversations when I could, capturing Eleanor's venom and Richard's indifference. I didn't know exactly what I'd do with all this evidence, but instinct told me I'd need it. At school, I slowly started opening up to Ms. Albright. Not about everything, not at first, but little things. I told her about feeling like I didn't matter at home, about the constant comparisons to Chloe, about the financial disparity. I never mentioned the golf club or the blood, but I gave her enough pieces that she started to see the puzzle. She didn't push, didn't demand I tell her everything, but she started checking in with me regularly. She'd ask how I was doing, really doing, and she'd wait for real answers. One day in late May, she gave me a pamphlet for a youth support organization. I volunteer with them sometimes, she said casually, like it was no big deal. They help teenagers dealing with difficult family situations. They have resources, counselors, legal advice, just in case you ever need something like that. I took the pamphlet and thanked her, my hands shaking slightly as I folded it and put it in my backpack. That night, alone in my room, I read every word 3 times. There were options I hadn't even known existed. Emancipation, legal separation from your parents before you turned 18. It seemed impossible, like something from a TV show, not real life. But it was real, and it was a way out. Summer came, and with it more hours at the cafe and less time at home. Eleanor complained about my absence, constantly accused me of being selfish and abandoning my responsibilities, but I didn't care anymore. Let her do her own dishes. Let Chloe clean her own room. I was done being their servant. The more distance I put between myself and them, the clearer I could think, the more I could see how abnormal everything had been. I started seeing a counselor through the youth organization, a kind woman named Dr. Patricia, who specialized in family trauma. It was free, thankfully, because there was no way I could afford therapy otherwise. In her small, comfortable office, I finally told someone the whole truth. About the golf club, about the blood, about my father walking away, about years of being treated like I was less than human by the people who were supposed to love me most. Dr. Patricia didn't look shocked or disbelieving. She just listened, and when I was done, she said something that changed everything. Maya, what you've experienced is abuse. Severe sustained abuse, and you don't have to live with it. You have rights, and there are people who can help you enforce them. That word, abuse. I'd never let myself use it before. It was what happened to other people in movies or on the news. But hearing her say it, hearing someone with credentials and authority validate what I'd been through, it was like permission to finally be angry. Not sad, not hopeful, but genuinely righteously angry. Through the organization, I was connected with a law student intern named David Chen. He was doing pro bono work over the summer before his final year of law school, and he seemed almost too young to be helping with something so serious. But when I showed him my evidence, the photos, the recordings, the journal entries, his boyish face went hard. "This is documentation of sustained physical and emotional abuse," he said, spreading the printed photos across his desk. "These recordings of your mother are damning, and your father's negligence, his failure to protect you, that's actionable too." He looked up at me and I saw anger in his eyes, but not at me, for me. "Maya, you have a case, a strong one. We can petition for emancipation, and honestly, I think you could sue for damages if you wanted to. Medical bills, emotional distress, the cost of therapy. You're entitled to compensation for what they put you through." "I don't want their money," I said immediately, then stopped myself. "Actually, no, that's not true. I do want their money. I want every penny I'm owed. They've taken enough from me." David smiled, the first smile I'd seen from him. "Good, let's make them pay for what they did." Over the next few months, David worked on my case. He filed the emancipation petition in family court, documenting everything, building an airtight argument for why I needed to be legally freed from my parents' custody. He explained that at 17, with proof of financial independence, my own housing arranged through the youth organization, and clear evidence of abuse, I had a real shot. But we both knew that filing meant war. The moment those papers were served, there would be no going back. My family would know exactly what I was doing, and they would fight. People like Eleanor didn't accept defeat gracefully. They'd hired expensive lawyers, told whatever lies they needed to tell, tried to destroy me to protect their reputation. I was terrified, but I was also ready. I couldn't live like this anymore. I'd rather fight and lose than spend one more year in that house, walking on eggshells, waiting for the next explosion, slowly disappearing under the weight of their contempt. The day I decided to leave permanently was a Sunday in mid-August. Eleanor and Richard were throwing one of their famous garden parties, the kind where they invited all their rich friends to show off their perfect life. There was catered food, a bartender's string quartet music floating across the manicured lawn. Chloe was in her element, playing the perfect daughter, charming everyone with her practiced smile and easy conversation. I was there too, but only because Eleanor had insisted. She wanted the optics of the whole family together, the picture-perfect scene. I was told to smile, to be polite, to serve appetizers when needed, to not embarrass them. I played along for hours, a ghost in my own life, one last time. I'd been planning this for weeks. I had a bag hidden in the garage, packed with everything that mattered to me, which wasn't much. Clothes, my laptop, some photos of my grandparents who died when I was young and had actually loved me, my documents, my evidence, my new life packed into one duffel bag. I had a room waiting for me at a transitional housing facility for youth, arranged through the support organization. David had the emancipation papers ready to file first thing Monday morning. Everything was set. As the party hit its peak, with everyone laughing and drinking and celebrating their perfect suburban lives, I slipped away. I grabbed my bag from the garage, my hands steady, even though my heart was racing. This was it. This was the moment I took my life back. I walked back through the side yard, toward the front of the house, planning to just leave, quietly disappear into my new life without a scene. But Eleanor saw me. She was standing near the front porch, wine glass in hand, and her eyes went from my face to the bag in my hand. For a moment, we just stared at each other. "Where do you think you're going?" she asked, her voice low and dangerous. Around us, the party continued, people oblivious to the confrontation brewing. This was my moment. I could make a scene, could tell everyone here exactly what kind of person Eleanor really was. I could destroy her reputation the way she'd tried to destroy my spirit. But I didn't. That would have been stooping to her level, and I was better than that. I was better than all of them. Instead, I looked her straight in the eye and said, "I'm going somewhere I don't have to pay in blood just to exist." Her face went white, then red. "You ungrateful little—" "No," I interrupted, my voice clear and strong. "I'm not doing this anymore. I'm not listening to your insults. I'm not accepting your abuse. I'm not pretending any of this is normal. You're right about one thing, though. I'm not Chloe. I'm not you. I'm better than both of you, and I'm going to prove it by becoming someone who knows how to love, even after everything you did to me." Eleanor stepped forward, her hand raised like she might hit me right there in front of everyone. But I didn't flinch. I didn't step back. I just looked at her, and maybe she saw something different in my eyes because she lowered her hand. "If you leave, don't come back," she hissed. "You'll be nothing without us. You'll fail, you'll be alone, and you'll realize that we were the only people who would ever tolerate you." I smiled, then a real smile, because I finally understood the truth. You're wrong. I've been alone my whole life. The difference is, now I'm choosing it instead of having it forced on me. And you know what the funny thing is, Eleanor? You will remember this moment. You'll remember the day your daughter walked away and didn't look back. And you'll wonder if maybe, just maybe, you pushed too hard. But by then it won't matter because I'll be too far gone to care. I walked away, then down the driveway, past the expensive cars and the pretty flowers and the sound of laughter that had never included me. I didn't run. I didn't look back. I just walked, each step taking me further from the life that had tried to break me and closer to the one I was going to build. Eleanor didn't follow. I don't know if she said anything to the guests, what excuse she made for my departure. I didn't care. For the first time in my life, their opinion of me was completely irrelevant. The first few weeks in transitional housing were strange. I had a small room to myself, shared common areas with other teenagers in similar situations, and a whole team of support workers checking in regularly. I still worked at the cafe, but I enrolled in online classes to finish high school early. David filed the Emancipation papers, and we waited. Then the counterattack began. Eleanor and Richard hired an expensive law firm, one of those places with names in the walls and original art in the conference rooms. They fought the Emancipation tooth and nail, claiming I was a troubled teen running away from reasonable discipline, that I had mental health issues, that I was lying about the abuse for attention. They went further. Chloe started a campaign on social media, posting old photos of our family, looking happy, writing long posts about her troubled sister, who'd abandoned them despite their love and support. She posted the photos she'd taken that day, the ones of me on her floor crying, but she cropped them to make it look like I'd destroyed her room in a rage, that I was unstable and violent. Her friends shared the posts. Suddenly, people I'd gone to school with were commenting about what a psycho I was. Richard showed up at the cafe one afternoon, causing a scene in front of customers. "Stop this nonsense and come home," he demanded. "You're embarrassing the family. We can work this out privately." When I refused to leave with him when I asked him to go, he got louder. "I'm your father, and I'm ordering you to come home." My manager had to threaten to call the police before he left, and I quit that job the next day, too terrified he'd come back. But I didn't break. I didn't go back. Every attack they launched made me more certain that leaving was the right choice, because people who loved you didn't do these things. People who cared about you didn't try to humiliate you on social media or harass you at work. They were proving my case better than any lawyer could. The day of the Emancipation hearing was terrifying. I sat in that courtroom in my best clothes, which weren't very impressive, facing my parents across the aisle. They looked angry and self-righteous, like I was the one who'd wronged them. Chloe was there too, ready to testify about what a terrible sister I was. But David was prepared. He presented my evidence systematically and devastating effect. The photos of my bruises clearly dated doctors' reports from the youth clinic confirming my injuries. The recordings of Eleanor's cruel words, her voice dripping with contempt. The financial records showing the clear disparity in how they spent money on Chloe versus me. Ms. Albright testified about the state I'd been in at school, her concerns for my well-being. Dr. Patricia testified about the psychological impact of sustained emotional and physical abuse. The most damaging moment came when David played a recording I'd made just a week after the golf club incident. It was Eleanor and Chloe talking in the kitchen, not knowing I had my phone recording in my pocket, as I did dishes. "Do you think she learned her lesson?" Chloe had asked. "Oh, she learned," Eleanor had responded, her voice satisfied. "She knows her place now. Sometimes you have to be firm with the ones who forget where they stand." The courtroom went silent when that recording played. I watched my father's face go pale. Even their expensive lawyer seemed at a loss for words. When it was my turn to speak, I didn't yell or cry or lose control. I spoke calmly and clearly about growing up in that house, about the constant message that I was less than worthless, undeserving of basic respect or affection. I talked about the golf club, about the blood, about my father seeing me broken and choosing to walk away. I looked at each of them as I spoke. "I'm not here for revenge," I said, looking directly at Eleanor. "I'm here for freedom. You tried to break me to convince me I was nothing, but you failed. I know my worth now, and it has nothing to do with your opinion of me. I don't need you to be my parents anymore. I've learned that some people aren't capable of love, and that's not a reflection on the people they hurt. It's a reflection on them." The judge was a woman in her 50s, with kind eyes and a stern demeanor. She asked my parents if they'd like to respond to my testimony. Richard started to speak some prepared statement about how they'd only wanted what was best for me, but the judge cut him off. "Mr. Lancaster," she said, "I've been on the bench for 20 years. I've heard a lot of excuses from a lot of parents who hurt their children. I've never heard one that justified what I've seen documented here today." She looked at Eleanor. "Mrs. Lancaster, you beat your daughter with a golf club. You left her bleeding on the floor. And when your husband saw the aftermath, he did nothing. You both failed in the most fundamental duty of a parent, which is to protect your child, even if that means protecting them from yourself." She granted the emancipation. Just like that, I was legally an adult free from their custody and control. But David wasn't done. He immediately filed a civil suit on my behalf for damages, medical expenses, therapy costs, and pain and suffering. He argued that I was entitled to financial support for college since I was still a minor when I left, that I deserved compensation for years of abuse. My parents' lawyer tried to settle immediately, offering a small amount if I'd sign an NDA. David laughed in his face. "We're going to trial," he said, "and we're going to win." We did. It took another 6 months, but we won. The jury deliberated for less than 3 hours before awarding me a significant settlement. Not millions, but enough. Enough for college, enough for therapy, enough to start a real life. The judge also granted me a restraining order against all 3 of them. They weren't allowed within 500 feet of me. The day the settlement came through, I sat in David's tiny office and just stared at the check. It wasn't really about the money, though. The money certainly helped. It was about validation, about a legal system saying, yes, what happened to you was wrong. Yes, you deserved better. Yes, they have to pay for what they did. "Thank you," I said to David, who'd worked on my case mostly for free, driven by his own sense of justice. "You saved my life." "No," he said, shaking his head. "You saved your own life. I just helped with the paperwork." I finished high school through online classes and enrolled in college the following fall. I studied social work because if I'd learned anything from my experience, it was that there were other kids out there like me, kids in houses that looked perfect from the outside but were rotting from within. I wanted to be the person I'd needed when I was younger. College was hard in ways I hadn't expected. While other students complained about their parents being overbearing or embarrassing, I sat alone in my dorm room and tried not to feel the absence of family. Holidays were the worst. Everyone went home for Thanksgiving and Christmas, but I stayed on campus working part-time jobs and trying to build a life from nothing. But slowly, I found my people. I made friends, real friends, who liked me for who I was, not who I pretended to be. I dated a little, though trust was hard. I had a tendency to flinch when people raised their voices to interpret kindness as manipulation. But I worked on it in therapy, and slowly I started to believe that maybe I was worthy of love after all. I graduated with honors and got a job at a nonprofit that helped at-risk youth. I worked with kids from abusive homes, from foster care, from situations that made my childhood look tame. I helped them navigate the legal system, find safe housing, access therapy, and support. I saw myself in every scared teenager who walked through our doors, and I promised each one the same thing. You don't have to stay. You don't have to accept this. You deserve better. Years passed. I built a life I was proud of. I got promoted, moved into a small but nice apartment, adopted a cat named Shadow because I thought the name was fitting. I had friends, a community, a purpose. I was happy, or at least I was healing, and that felt close enough. I didn't hear from my family for 15 years. Not a call, not a letter, not an email. The restraining order expired after 5 years, but they never tried to contact me. I assumed that meant they'd moved on. Found it easier to pretend I'd never existed than to confront what they'd done. Then came the voicemail. It was a Saturday morning, and I was at the farmer's market near my apartment picking out fresh flowers like I did every weekend. Hydrangeas were in season, their huge blooms in shades of blue and purple. I'd always loved hydrangeas ever since I was little. They seemed resilient, somehow thriving even in harsh conditions. My phone buzzed with the voicemail notification. Unknown number. I almost deleted it without listening, assumed it was spam or a wrong number. But something made me check it. Maybe it was intuition, or maybe just curiosity. I stepped away from the flower stand, pressed play, and heard a voice I hadn't heard in a decade and a half. "Maya!" Eleanor's voice was unsteady, nothing like the cold certainty I remembered. She sounded old, tired, human in a way I'd never heard before. "Maya, it's your mother. I know you probably don't want to hear from me. I know I don't have the right to call, but I needed to say this even if you delete it without listening. I'm sorry. I'm so sorry for everything. For the way I treated you, for the things I said, for what I did. I've had a lot of time to think, and I know now that I failed you. I was your mother, and I hurt you in ways that can never be fixed. You didn't deserve any of it. I just wanted you to know that. I'm sorry." The message ended. I stood there in the middle of the farmer's market, hydrangeas forgotten my hand, unconsciously moving to the scar on my forehead. The physical scar that had long since faded to a thin white line barely visible unless you knew to look for it. But the internal scars, those were a different story. I listened to the message again and again, trying to figure out if I felt anything, if those words meant anything to me after all this time. Was there satisfaction in knowing she finally admitted what she'd done? Was there pain at hearing her voice? Was there some part of me that wanted to call back to hear more, to maybe find some kind of closure? No, the answer was simply no. I felt nothing for Eleanor Lancaster anymore. Not love, not hate, not anger, not even pity. She was just a woman who'd hurt me a long time ago, and that hurt had shaped me, but didn't define me anymore. I deleted the voicemail. I didn't hesitate, didn't second-guess myself. I just pressed delete and watched it disappear into the digital void. Then I went back to the flower stand, bought a huge bouquet of blue hydrangeas, and walked home to my quiet, peaceful, chosen life. That's the thing they don't tell you about healing. It doesn't look like forgiveness or reconciliation or dramatic confrontations. Sometimes it just looks like pressing delete and moving on. Sometimes the best revenge is simply being happy without the people who tried to destroy you. I'm 32 now. I have a good job, good friends, a life I built entirely on my own terms. I still have a slight limp when it gets cold, a reminder of that day with the golf club. I still have the scar on my forehead. I still have bad days where the old fears creep in, where I wonder if I'm really as worthy as I tell myself I am. But I also have a future. I have plans and dreams and hopes that belong entirely to me. I've helped dozens of kids escape situations like mine. I've testified before the state legislature about child protection laws. I've turned my pain into purpose, and that's the closest thing to healing I know. Your worth isn't determined by the people who fail to see it. You don't owe loyalty to people who use it as a weapon against you. And sometimes the bravest thing you can do is simply walk away and build a life they can't touch. I walked away from my family 15 years ago, and I've never looked back. Not because I'm cold or unforgiving, but because I finally understood that some people don't deserve a place in your life, even if they're family, especially if they're family. The scars remain, they always will, but they're not reminders of weakness anymore. They're proof that I survived, that I fought, that I chose myself when no one else would choose me. And that's something worth more than any apology, any amount of money, any reconciliation could ever be. So I deleted that voicemail, arranged my hydrangeas in a vase, and made myself a cup of coffee in my quiet apartment. I looked out the window at the city I'd built my life in, far from the suburban house where I grew up, and I smiled, because I was free in every way that mattered. And that freedom was worth every scar, every tear, every terrifying step I took to get here. Sometimes you don't get the family you deserve. Sometimes you have to become your own family, your own protector, your own source of love and validation. And that's not a tragedy. That's survival. That's strength. That's knowing that the only person who truly needs to believe in you is you. I learned that I have the power to write my own ending, and I chose to make it a happy one. Not perfect, not easy, but mine. And that makes all the difference. So here's my question for you. Have you ever had to walk away from someone you were supposed to love? How did you find the courage to choose yourself? Drop your story in the comments below, because your experience might be exactly what someone else needs to hear today. And if this story resonated with you, if it gave you hope or made you feel less alone, please hit that like button and subscribe. These stories matter, and your support helps me keep sharing them. Remember, you are never as alone as you feel, and you are always stronger than you think.